The message arrived like a warning bell in the dead of night. An urgent communication flashed across every screen in Earth's command center, one that no one had expected yet feared for years. A fleet of alien ships was on its way. The Galactic Council had dismissed humanity as an insignificant species, too primitive to be worthy of their attention. But now, as the ships closed in, the weight of their judgment was heavier than ever. Earth had no seat at the table, and now they had no protection. I sat in the command chair, my fingers gripping the edge, listening to the cold, metallic hum of the room. The air smelled faintly of ozone, a reminder of the storm raging outside. The rain beat against the windows, but it wasn't the weather that kept me on edge, it was the fleet. They were coming. And we weren't ready. Alex, a voice interrupted my thoughts. Sarah's voice, sharp but steady. They're not responding to our communications. Nothing. Like we're not even here. I turned to face her, her face lit by the glow of her console. Sarah was the best pilot we had, and in moments like this, I relied on her calm. But I could see the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers twitched over the controls. She was just as uneasy as I was. Is the fleet still on course? I asked, my voice low but firm. Yeah. Estimated arrival in less than 2 hours. She paused, her eyes flicking to the long-range radar display. What's the plan? The question echoed in my mind. What was the plan? We had no allies. The Council had seen fit to ignore us, label us as nothing more than a curiosity, a fleeting species whose moment had passed. And now, they were coming to make that point clear. We fight, I said, more to myself than to Sarah. We're not going down without a fight. I swiveled back to my console, pulling up the intelligence feed. Jonas, our tech expert, was already running simulations, his hands a blur across his keyboard. His eyes flicked between the data streams, his brow furrowed in concentration. Jonas had a knack for seeing things others didn't. He'd been the first to identify the flaw in the enemy's communication network last year, something small that could have led to a major advantage if anyone had taken it seriously. Jonas, what are we looking at? I asked, leaning over the console to get a better look. Aliens, he muttered, not looking up. Massive fleet, all armed to the teeth. But they're not as advanced as they think they are. Their weapons are powerful, but their coordination, it's sloppy. There's a gap. A gap. That was the opening we needed. Can you exploit it? Jonas finally looked up, his eyes gleaming with that familiar spark. Oh, I can exploit it. But it'll take everything we've got. You need to trust me, Alex. This isn't going to be pretty. I didn't hesitate. Do it. He nodded and got to work, pulling up schematics for the alien ships. The technology was beyond anything we'd ever seen, but if there was one thing humanity excelled at, it was ingenuity. We could take their tech and turn it against them. We just had to be faster, smarter, and more resourceful than they ever expected. Alex, Sarah interrupted again, her voice tight with urgency. I'm getting a transmission from the Galactic Council. They're telling us to stand down. They're offering assistance, but only if we surrender. I froze. What did they say? That we're too weak. That they'll handle it from here. The Council. Of course. They thought they could handle everything. They never even considered the possibility that Earth would stand its ground. That we'd refuse their help and fight for our right to exist. I don't need their help, I said, my voice rising now. We're going to take this fight to them. Prepare the defenses. The lights in the room flickered, and for a moment the whole world felt like it was teetering on the edge of something enormous. The door to the command center slid open, and Captain Laura, an alien we had previously deemed a potential ally, stepped inside. Her eyes were cold, calculating. You're making a mistake, she said, her voice smooth, but tinged with something unreadable. The Council is not to be trifled with. I stood, my hand instinctively resting on the weapon at my side. And yet here we are. If you're here to warn us, save your breath. We're fighting this alone. She tilted her head, as if weighing my words. You misunderstand me. I'm here to offer help. The Council doesn't know what they're dealing with. You think your weapons can match theirs? She let out a humorless laugh. They're playing a game you don't even understand. Her words hung in the air, heavy with implications. A new possibility had just opened. If the Council was wrong, if we could make a stand, what did that mean for Earth? And what did Laura really want? Help or not, we're fighting, I said, my voice resolute. We'll take our chances. She stared at me for a long moment, her eyes flicking to the monitors, then back to me. So be it. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out. The room felt colder now. A moment of silence passed. Then the alert on the screen blared again. The fleet was closer. The storm was almost upon us. The air in the command center felt like it was vibrating with tension. I stared at the screen in front of me, the display filled with readouts, warnings, and alerts. The alien fleet was closing in. Every second that passed, it seemed, brought them closer. Their ships were enormous, an ominous black mass against the backdrop of space. A collective sense of unease had settled over the room, heavier than the weight of the universe itself. 2 hours, Jonas muttered, his voice flat, almost mechanical. He was still hunched over his terminal, his fingers dancing across the keyboard with frantic energy. Less than that, actually. They're moving faster than we expected. I leaned in closer, scanning the data as if somehow it would reveal the key to victory. What's the status on the shields? Can we hold them off for long enough? We can delay them, but that's it, Jonas replied, his eyes still fixed on the screen. His voice lacked the usual confidence that I relied on. He was a genius, but even he could only do so much. Our weapons systems are primitive compared to theirs. We'll be outmatched, outgunned. I felt a chill, not from the cold of the room, but from the reality of the situation. The Council had dismissed us, mocked us, believing Earth was nothing more than a small, insignificant blip in the galaxy. But now, with their entire fleet heading our way, they had realized too late that humanity would not lie down. I glanced at Sarah, who had her hands poised over her console but hadn't moved in minutes. Her jaw was tight, and I knew she was trying to focus, but the weight of the moment had caught up with her, too. You all right? I asked, my voice steady, though the storm inside me was building. She finally met my eyes, her gaze sharp. I'm fine. Just thinking. If we're going to make it through this, we need more than just brute force. We need to outsmart them. I nodded, understanding what she meant. Strategy. The only thing humanity had in its favor was its adaptability. If we could hit them in their weak spots, take advantage of their arrogance, we might stand a chance. But we didn't have time to waste. The clock was ticking. What's the status on the satellite grid? I asked Jonas. He didn't look up. It's functional, but we can't guarantee it'll do much against their shields. They'll detect any interference the moment we fire. We'll have to make it count, I said, clenching my fists. I turned to Sarah. Can you get close enough to their fleet to plant a virus in their navigation system? If we can disrupt their coordination, we might stand a chance. She met my gaze again, her eyes narrowing as she thought it over. I can. But it's going to be a one-way trip. I'll be in their range long enough to get the job done, but I won't be able to pull back once I've deployed it. A wave of dread washed over me. I knew what that meant. It wasn't a mission with a high chance of survival. If she went in, it would be a one-shot deal. And I wasn't sure I could live with the consequences of losing her. But I couldn't show her hesitation. Not now. We don't have a choice, I said, my voice harder than I intended. We fight or we die. Sarah gave a tight nod, her jaw set. Then I'll do it. She stood up, strapping on her gear with methodical precision. Her movements were fluid, practiced. But even in the middle of this chaos, I could see the flash of uncertainty in her eyes, though she wouldn't admit it. I swallowed, my throat dry, and then turned to Jonas. Are you ready on your end? He gave a small, forced smile, but there was no hiding the fear in his eyes. Ready as I'll ever be. The reality of the situation settled over me like a suffocating weight. We were out of options, out of time. There was no turning back. We were going to fight. We were going to fight until we couldn't anymore. I stood up from the command chair, feeling the shift in the air as everyone prepared for the mission ahead. The hum of the consoles, the low thrum of the ship's engines, all of it suddenly felt too quiet. The tension was unbearable. "Sarah," I said, my voice low. "Make it count. We need this." "I will," she said, her voice steady despite the storm that brewed outside the walls of the command center. As Sarah walked toward the launch bay, Jonas and I remained behind, monitoring her progress. Every second felt like an eternity. I had no illusions about what she was about to do. The odds were stacked against her. But if anyone could pull it off, it was Sarah. The seconds ticked by, dragging on, until the familiar, low rumble of the launch bay door opening echoed through the command center. "Launch in 5. Came the call from the flight deck. I glanced at Jonas, his face a mirror of my own anxiety. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The mission was in motion, and there was no stopping it now. I looked back at the screen, watching Sarah's ship detach from the station. My heart pounded as the tension mounted. She was heading straight for the fleet, knowing full well that this was her only chance. "Good luck," I whispered under my breath. "And God help us all." The countdown had begun. I watched the digital clock on the screen tick down, each second a hammer strike against the fragile sense of hope I had left. Sarah was heading straight into the heart of the enemy fleet, her ship a speck of humanity against the vast darkness. I couldn't tear my eyes away, despite knowing what it meant. Jonas' voice broke the silence. "She's entering their detection range. They've started tracking her." I didn't need to ask how he knew. The blips on the radar were unmistakable. The aliens were onto her, and the chase was about to begin. "Can we still upload the virus?" I asked, my voice taut with urgency. Jonas' fingers flew over the console, but his face told me everything I needed to know before he spoke. "It's not good. They're countering every attempt, trying to lock us out. She's got less than 5 minutes before they detect our interference. If she doesn't get close enough to deploy the virus, the whole mission's a bust." I clenched my jaw, fighting against the surge of helplessness rising in my chest. We had all gambled everything on Sarah's ability to get through. If we lost her, we lost everything. A crackling noise came through the comms. It was Sarah. "I'm in," her voice said, sharp and steady, despite the mounting chaos. "I'll upload the virus now. Get ready." I inhaled sharply, glancing at Jonas. He nodded grimly, fingers poised over the keyboard. We had one shot. The seconds stretched into agonizing minutes. Each pulse of data that pinged back from Sarah's ship felt like a dagger to my heart. My mind raced, calculating the odds, trying to see beyond the imminent disaster. There had to be a way to win this. There had to be a way to. "Shit!" Jonas shouted, his fingers flying faster now. "The fleet's focusing all their firepower on her. She's too close to the command ship." I cursed under my breath. If they hit her now, if they destroyed her ship, it was over. I snapped into action, mentally reviewing every possibility. "Jonas, can we hack into their fire control systems? Disable their weapons?" He looked at me, frustration written all over his face. "I can try, but if they're focusing on her, they're not using their full capabilities on us. We'd be vulnerable. We don't have a choice." I snapped, gripping the edge of the console. "We need a window. Something, anything." Jonas worked furiously, his focus unbroken, but I could see the strain in the set of his shoulders, the way his brow furrowed. We were all at the mercy of Sarah's next move. I'd watched her grow over the years, watched her rise from a tech specialist to a leader. She was the one person I could count on to get us out of this, if anyone could. The comms crackled again. "I'm doing it now." Sarah's voice was tight, edged with something I couldn't place. "The virus is in. It's working." A wave of relief hit me, but it was fleeting. I looked at the radar screen, and the fleet's movements shifted. The virus was doing its job, but the aliens weren't backing down. They were adapting too fast, countering everything we threw at them. "She's too close to their main ship," Jonas muttered, his voice barely audible. "I can't disable their shields in time. They'll crush her if she stays in range." "Sarah, get out of there!" I ordered into the comms. "You have to pull back now." The seconds stretched into an eternity before she responded. "I can't. Their shields are stronger than we thought. I'm trapped." I felt a pit in my stomach open wide. She was caught. There was no escaping it now. But then, an unexpected shift. The fleet's formation faltered. The command ship, its massive hull trembling from the impact of the virus, began to wobble in space, its systems scrambling. The virus was working, but the damage was only just beginning. "Jonas," I said, a sudden realization hitting me. "She's not trapped. She's buying us time. She's holding their attention. We need to push them now." He didn't hesitate. With one fluid motion, his fingers were typing again, activating a new set of commands. "I'm activating the backup strike. It's all we've got." The backup strike was risky, untested, but it was our last option. I had no choice but to trust it, and Sarah. The screens in front of us flickered as the backup system powered up, and I could see the alien fleet shift again. They were trying to regroup, but we weren't giving them a chance. Jonas had a plan, and as much as I hated relying on it, it was working. "We're doing it," Jonas whispered, barely able to conceal the hope that flickered in his voice. "We've got them on the back foot." And then, a burst of static broke through the comms. "I'm clear." Sarah's voice came through, sounding strained but resolute. "The fleet's reeling, and I've activated their core systems. You've got your opening." I could feel my heart stop for a moment as I processed her words. Sarah had made it out. Against impossible odds, she had done it. The screen in front of me flickered, the alien fleet now split, disoriented by the damage to their central command. The opening we'd needed. "Time to finish this," I said, my voice steady, filled with a sense of finality. We were going to win this, but it wasn't over. The real fight had just begun. The battlefield was silent, suspended in a moment of grim anticipation. I stood at the helm of our ship, staring at the shattered fleet of the enemy in front of us. Our opening had come, thanks to Sarah's sacrifice, but it wasn't over yet. The enemy was stunned, their once commanding position reduced to a fragmented mess of disarray, but they were still a threat. And we were running out of time. "How long do we have?" I asked, my voice carrying over the comms. Jonas's voice crackled back, laced with controlled urgency. 10 minutes tops. If we don't act now, they'll stabilize and regroup. We'll be back to square one." Sarah's transmission buzzed in next, the sound distorted but her tone unshakable. "I'm on the edge of their systems, but the longer I stay here, the more likely they'll lock me out. You need to strike now." The air in the command center felt thin, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. The entire war could hinge on the next few minutes. If we didn't capitalize on this opening, the enemy would recover and turn the tide. The virus had done its work, and now it was up to us to finish it. "Take the shot, Jonas." "No," I said, my voice hard, no room for hesitation. His fingers moved across the console with practiced speed. The tension in the air thickened as I watched the various feeds, the strained pulse of our engines steady but holding back on full acceleration. We weren't alone in this. The enemy might be disorganized, but they were not beaten. "We've activated the first phase of the strike," Jonas confirmed, his eyes focused and intense. "This is it. The virus is going to destabilize their fleet's core. If we can hit their flagship now, we can take them all down." I could hear the steady hum of machinery around me as the crew worked in sync, preparing for the final assault. It wasn't just about the attack. It was about making sure we could live to see the aftermath. There was no margin for error. The communication feed beeped again, a faint crackling sound signaling that Sarah was on the line. "You've got a clear shot, but they're starting to form up. If you don't hit them now, you'll miss your window." My stomach twisted. She was right. We were gambling everything on one decisive strike, and the smallest delay could turn the tide against us. I didn't have the luxury of second-guessing. "Hold steady," I said, steeling myself for what was to come. Jonas's hand hovered over the firing control. "Ready to fire on your mark." "Do it." A brief pause. Then, the deep hum of the weapon systems as the charge built. The tension mounted, and the air felt suffocating. The enemy flagship was in our sights. All it would take was one shot, one perfect strike, and we would tear through their command center like a blade through silk. The seconds stretched into an unbearable eternity. I watched the enemy ships reforming, attempting to regain control. My eyes locked on the flagship's hull, the massive structure now vulnerable, its shields faltering under the strain of the virus. If we didn't strike soon, they would re-energize the shield and retreat behind it. "Firing in 3, 2, 1. Jonas's fingers slammed into the controls, and in an instant, the world outside the ship erupted in a blinding burst of light. I braced myself, feeling the shockwave reverberate through the hull, even as the enemy flagship's shields buckled. The momentary silence that followed was deafening, and the display screens blinked with disorienting flashes. The first strike had landed. But had it landed true? "Direct hit," Jonas said, his voice hoarse. "But the flagship's still operational. They're repairing their systems." "No," I whispered, my heart racing. "That can't be." Before I could finish, Sarah's voice filled the comms again, her tone more forceful than before. "I'm in their core. I've just opened up their main reactor. You're running out of time." I swallowed hard, the weight of her words crashing over me. The flagship was crippled, but it wasn't enough. It would need to be finished, and fast. I glanced at the screen, watching the enemy ships scramble to regain cohesion. They were still dangerously close to regrouping, their counteroffensive already beginning to unfold. "We have one last chance," I said, a sense of grim finality settling over me. "Jonas, fire everything. We're not leaving any room for them to recover." Jonas's hands were steady, the fire in his eyes matching the urgency in mine. "Firing now," he replied. The second barrage was launched. This time, it was a relentless wave of projectiles, all aimed directly at the center of the enemy's flagship. I watched as the massive ship absorbed the first blast, but its weakened defenses couldn't withstand the barrage that followed. One by one, their shield systems cracked, and the ship's core detonated in a brilliant flash of destruction. The screen went black for a heartbeat, and I felt a surge of overwhelming relief flood through me. When the display returned, the flagship was gone, reduced to nothing but drifting debris. "We did it," Sarah said, her voice soft but filled with fierce pride. "You've taken them down." I leaned back, allowing myself a rare moment of breath. The fight wasn't over yet. We still had to finish clearing the remaining enemy ships, but the war's course had changed. The tide had turned in our favor. Against all odds, humanity had struck back. "We're not done yet," I replied, my voice filled with determination. "But we've taken the first step. We fight on. Together." And in that moment I knew we had won more than a battle. We had won the right to fight, to survive, and to prove that humanity would never surrender.